This is not a full install. I'm not showing you step by step. There's a couple videos out there with that. Here I'm showing you the tools you're gonna need, the bolts you're gonna take off, the hoses you're gonna take off, and the electrical connectors you're gonna take off. So this is a quick reference guide just to get you out there and on the vehicle, because honestly, watching a 40-minute video is just not for me. So I just decided to make this because all the other videos on this are super long. So here we go. All right, guys, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of the tools you're going to need for this job. To start, 3/8" ratchet, a couple of extensions, a wobble joint, and your spark plug socket, obviously. Next, we're going to have the 1/4" ratchet, an extension for that, the wobble joint here as well. And then I got a 10mm long and short. You're going to use these for the brackets as well as the coil packs, and then a 8mm long and short. You're going to use those for the air intake bolts. Then you have a flathead screwdriver. You're going to use that for your hose clamps, as well as to just kind of help ease those hoses off of the intake. And these tools right here I got from Harbor Freight, proved to be pretty useful during the taking off of everything, as well as putting it back on. You don't necessarily need this, but it's a good idea. Maybe have a little bit of this wiring shield, I guess, to go around your wires, because with the heat in there, all those coverings are going to be pretty brittle. So when you're touching those plugs, you're probably going to break a little bit of it. So this right here actually proved pretty useful to keep your engine looking, you know, stock and professionally done. All right, so we're at the vehicle. It's a good idea before you start just to make sure that your maintenance supervisor is there and making sure you're not going to get yourself hurt. All right, next we're going to cover those hoses. So the first hose you're going to take off is going to be off the air intake, and then you'll move this whole section out of the way. I have the air rate intake, but the stock one's actually pretty similar. So you'll take this hose off, and then you'll take this hose here out, as well as this one, and you'll unclip these two hoses from the little push-in points there. And then the last hose you're going to take off is on the driver's side right here. That one actually took a little bit of work for me to get off, but eventually we got there. Be careful when taking off this one with the hard line, because you don't want to break that and get yourself in a bind. Alright, so you're going to start by removing the engine cover, setting that aside, and then we're going to cover those bolts that you're going to need to take off. The first two, I started on the left side, on the passenger side, so the first two bolts I did were these two bolts right here for the brackets, and that just helped to move these metal lines out of the way. Next, you're going to get these two bolts right here on this bracket here. It has a little nipple right there, so make sure you lift that up off so you can move your intake around once you get to that point. Alright, going to the driver's side, the two bolts you're going to need to remove on this bracket are here and here, and then there's two more down low, a little bit harder to see, there and there. Throttle body. And then lastly, for bracket bolts, with these two right here. Once you take all these bracket bolts out and you get the intake bolts out, you can actually, you don't have to take off these bolts down here on the lower side of this bracket like most of the videos say. You can actually just lift up this bracket over here where the nipple is, slide your intake towards the passenger side, and you'll clear these holes. Alright, next it's going to be electrical connectors. Start over here on the top of the intake, get this one here, then there's one right here, as well as the intake temperature sensor right there. Be careful with those as they are pretty brittle. Next we're just going to cover those little Christmas tree push-ins. So you're going to get this one right here with that trim removal tool. If you're going to remove this whole bracket, it's actually not necessary to take this one out, but you can if it gives you a little bit more space to work with. The more difficult one to get to is actually back here on this main harness. There's 2 points right here and right there. So that took me actually a little bit of work to get to these and get those off. All right, now we're going to cover those intake manifold bolts. So you have 3 on the top side here, and then you have 4 running along this passenger side. So you have 1 right here, the hose is a little bit in the way. You have 1 right under here. Once you move those hoses out of the way, those hard lines, 1 right there, and then there's a last one in the back that's almost kind of concealed by this little isolator right there. All right, so once you get your intake removed, it's a good idea to put some napkins or some paper towels or something inside of those holes so you don't get any dirt or debris floating inside your intake, which will eventually get into your engine, cause some damage. While you have the intake off, it's a good idea to change the little O-rings that go around and seal up the intake. I'm in the process of doing that right here. And as you can see, once you remove that intake and the isolator, it's pretty easy to get to the coil packs. Nothing's really in the way. Once you change those spark plugs out, you just reverse the order to assemble.